He probably doesn't need any introduction, but but we're going to get into a number of really, really interesting topics here. Current state of the television marketplace, sports, how sports have evolved over the last year. Been a lot of really great things to talk about on that front. And so why don't we jump in? You've been buying TV for a few years. You've seen your number of a number of upfronts over time, right? So is the current way we're transacting, whether it be upfront or scatter, is it still working? And if there are other areas that you want to change?
I mean, I think parts of it still work and parts of it don't work, right? Just like great politician answer, right? I think the fact that, I mean, we need a marketplace. We can't have a situation where it's just random. Like, so the idea of a marketplace is great, right? It works for everybody because everybody has information and can make decisions and things like that. Some of the things that we work around, whether it be timing, this goofy broadcast year, which was, a legacy from the 1960s when car companies were coming out with new model years. We're buying inventory. If you stretch it all the way out, we're buying inventory for 18 months in the future. I mean, go tell my CFO I got to make a decision on what my spend's going to be in 18 months. He looks at me like I'm a Martian. So, I mean, there's parts of it. I'd say that the timing is a big part of it. I'd say that flexibility, and this is both ways, right? I don't mean to sound like it's a one-way street and just marketers wanting, concessions. We have to really have a partnership. Last year was flexibility last year was a big problem, right? A lot of people got stuck and a lot of people got burned. But when I think about other media that I buy, if I can buy video on YouTube, Facebook, a million other places, and I can make a decision within 4 weeks, to have to make a decision, that's 50% flexible after, with 90 days out. I mean, it's just a little bit archaic, right? The way we look at ratings, the way we think about the way we look at audience guarantees today and how ratings are sort of overestimated because there's no, and it's not a fault of the TV suppliers because they don't have an upside, right? If they have a hit show, they got to get paid for it. And today's model of just only having a one-way street, I only get paid for under delivery and I don't, the networks don't get paid for over delivery. So there's a lot of things like that I think are just they're kind of beyond their time in today's market and it's especially compounded by fragmentation. I mean, average primetime rating now being a 2 doesn't help tell the story about the ability to scale reach. It's still the best place to drive reach, but the differences are a hell of a lot smaller than they used to be. It's getting more and more condensed and more, pulled together or torn apart. The differences between media are a lot more condensed than they were 10 years ago. 10 years ago when it was when cable, I'm going to sound really old because people are like, what's cable? I mean, it was a difference of you're buying, some things are doing a 12 rating and some things are doing a 0.2 rating. It's easy. Right now, everything's kind of smushed together a lot more than they were today. So a lot more than they were then. So things like that.
Yeah. So in terms of upfront, you mentioned, I mean, so it's not broken, but it's certainly the flexibility factor in the two-way street. I think that's very interesting. I mean, that's, you don't hear a lot of marketers, take that position, but I think that could be part of the longer term solution.
Right. Because I mean, today it's you don't, it takes sort of uncommon collaboration to figure out where the real pain points are and work together to fix them. It doesn't mean it's just, again, we can't have, I get in a lot of conversations with a lot of, whether they be fellow marketers or even, other people in the industry. It's just it can't be I want to solve all my pain points and I don't give a damn what everybody else's pain points are. It's it's just illogical, right? So we have to think of creative ways of how we're going to solve it.
Yeah, no doubt. How about measurement? I mean, clearly, a lot of problems there, a lot of opportunities as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of silos, there's agendas, there's, people holding on to, their past, they have more to lose than others. And so that sometimes limits collaboration. But just love to hear your thoughts in terms of measurement and, what needs to happen. And I know it's not a short-term fix.
Yeah, it's not, right. I mean, and yeah, and you talked about it. We could spend the next, week talking about where the measurement challenges are. And even in COVID, the measurement challenges that we have with COVID about like, how do you service equipment when you can't go into people's houses? I mean, there's so many things that you could talk about. I mean, the North Star is, needs to be, if we think about the user experience and the consumer today, the user experience is broken, right? If anybody watches a lot, does a lot of streaming, and I'm a sports guy, right? And a couple of my teams aren't good enough to be on, big grown up national ESPN. So I got to end up watching ESPN Plus. I see the same ads dozens of times in the same game. And we wonder why consumers get pissed off. So if we think about the consumer's got to be like the center, right? Because it's like ultimately like that's who we're trying to target. The user experience doesn't work, right? So how do we figure out how to create a better user experience? And that gets into everything from how do we create an environment we can truly do cross-media measurement, right? Today, in the connected TV space and the OTT space, there's just too many people, too many inventory sources, or I can find stuff, right? Maybe coming from Dish, it may be coming from, Samsung, it can come from so many different places. It's not a criticism. It's just, we can't manage the consumer experience with it being as fractured as it is today. So I would start with cross-media measurement. And again, I'm not objective because I've spent a lot of time working with the ANA and the WFA to try to help the industry move things along. And it's hard, right? It's really hard. Some of them are technical. A lot of them are, legacies, and people are afraid of change. But I think I would start with, we got to figure out how to drive the true consumer user experience in cross-media measurement. And that's not just like between linear and CTV and, all the artists that we formerly known as, video. It's like YouTube, Facebook. I mean, that's what consumers do. Consumers don't think about, well, I'm going to go watch an ad on YouTube, and then I'm going to go watch an ad on, on Sling, and I'm going to understand how they all kind of, they're separate and unique. They don't care. They just consume, right? So we have to figure that out. And I think cross-media measurement is the gateway to that. Again, like you said, really hard though.
Yeah. Yep. All right, let's talk a little about OTT. Obviously, just it was just kind of sea change. It really was from a viewership standpoint. But talking about just the revenue and just the the media value placed within that. So that presents opportunities. It absolutely presents obstacles as well. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, and you talked about a lot of the things that you talked about in your presentation before this and in the white paper that you guys did. I mean, they're there, right? The pros of targetability and a better way to measure are certainly like opportunities to have an enhanced experience. The part about some of the things around user experience and around, I think copy, and it's not, you kind of sort of touched on it in the white paper, but I think that especially in Addressable, the ability to have copy, especially in a day and age of, and maybe who knows whether I'm thinking about this in the right way, especially as data laws become more and more, I'll call them restrictive, although I'm not trying to make an editorial comment about governments, right? But it becomes, the privacy laws become tighter and more difficult. I think true contextual relevance at a really broad level, whether it be around, Mastercard, we spent a lot of time trying to be contextually relevant around things that matter to consumers: sports, music, cinema, travel, culinary. So I think that our ability to, and inherently TV, video is inherently contextually relevant. So our ability to be able to deliver messages in that space will be really, really powerful. And today I can't deliver, I can, but it's really hard to deliver a sports benefit message to me and a culinary benefit to my daughter who's a foodie, or a travel benefit to my wife who likes to travel. So, I mean, I think that copy is a big one that we have to figure out. In the digital space, it's easier with like DCO and things like that. Video is really hard. So that's the one thing I think that we that we don't spend enough time talking about the opportunity, because it's going to solve a lot of problems for us in terms of like a lot of the challenge we're going to have with data and things like that. I think that we can still, there's ways to work around that through like really broad conversations around contextual relevance and things like that.
Great, that's good stuff. All right, let's toggle over to sports.
Yep.
Clearly, Mastercard is a big believer in, in the power of sports, connecting with fans, build a brand. You guys have been involved with, your MLB, obviously for a long time, PGA Tour. These are, massive properties, massive media commitments, non-media commitments as well. So you're obviously placing your bets there, but it's working, obviously. So has it changed in the last year? Clearly, a lot changed in sports, but how do you see sports differently? And then ultimately, are you using any different tactics now, or social media more, or whatever that may be?
I mean, sports work. Again, I touched on a little bit earlier. Like, we're Mastercard. I won't make it give too much of a commercial about Mastercard, as wonderful as we are. We work really hard to be contextually relevant, because we're trying to drive. If I can reach somebody, if I can drive experiences matter more than things, is kind of a keystone for the Priceless campaign. It's, Priceless is not about material, I'm going to use my card to go buy stuff, and more about enabling and empowering our customers and consumers to live a better, deeper life. So how does that translate into like the media choices we make? Sports, culinary, travel, they're really, really solid in, the ability to be able to drive experiences. People love to have experiences around sports. And if you're a sports fan, you can remember all the moments, and I have a couple hanging on my back wall. I have a music experience on this shoulder and a sports experience on that shoulder. So we remember that stuff, right? I have, we spend time and attention to really drive those experiences. And from a business standpoint, we figured out that it works. Not in a warm, fuzzy way of, ooh, people will love me more. We've proven the more people have experiences with our brand, the better customers they're going to be. In a tangible way, they're more loyal, they spend less money in cash. So we've proven in a lot of different markets around the world that experiences matter. Experiences are really, really important. So how do we take that? So, and sports are a cornerstone of that. How do we move that in this new environment? Obviously, stadiums are empty. Doesn't make me less of a sports fan. It killed me to watch, like, you can't watch, too many hours of, cornhole or, arm wrestling. It's like, now sports are back, and where I haven't been in a stadium yet, but it's not that far down the path. So we had to think about, how do we deliver that in a virtual way? And through technology, we were able to do not just across sports, but all of our other passions. We were able to do a lot in terms of digital experiences. Instead of getting Ian Poulter, who's one of our golf ambassadors, to do a lesson for 20 or 30 cardholders at an event, he'd do it online, right? So so using that technology, and actually, it helped us obviously manage an environment where people couldn't get out, couldn't get to, to see somebody in a live event. It also helped us get to scale. It's one of those things where the previous group, where Sharon and Christopher were talking about, what are the things that you're not going to go back, you're not going to go back from, and they both talked about, I'm not walking into a supermarket again. I don't think brands are going to go back to not utilizing digital experiences. It brought us scale in a way that we would have never imagined before, right? It got us millions of people instead of, tens and hundreds of people. So I think it's going to be a blend. There's still no replacing that live experience, but the being great at virtual experiences, not just a function of I have to because people aren't in stadiums, but how it really helps me drive to scale. That's something that really radically changed and isn't going to go away, I don't think.
Yeah. No, I love the creative, the Justin Rose creative, the Poulter creative. It's been great for the brand. So clearly, sports TV is the number one, bar none, way to drive immediate reach and drive ratings. But that comes at a cost. I mean, the rights fees, they just seemed. I was stunned when the last round 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I'm equally as stunned now.
Yep.
I don't know how it all adds up. I don't know how you're going to be able to, sustain this. I'm sure that, clearly, uh, you know, Disney's not out there, putting X amount of money on the table, not, without knowing that I'm going to be able to exploit this. They're going to exploit this in streaming. That's a whole other outlet. But you and I had a interesting conversation just about the whole, the interconnectivity between consumers and and brands and networks and ultimately leagues. And then at the end game, how does an average, kind of 3-point shooter in the NBA, they're making 19-20 million dollars a year, and that's because of the TV rights. But that doesn't start with the TV rights. So I'd love to just have you kind of just share with the audience a little of that.
No, it's funny. We think about every year we talk about rights fees, and today is a perfect day because today we're going to find, they're going to be 32 freshly minted multimillionaires after the NFL draft tonight, right? So it's a great day if you're young and a good football player, which I'm neither. Yes, and we've always said like rights fees they're too much, they got to stop, but they never stop. And we've seen it. We've seen the NFL just went through, NHL just went through, NHL just got huge increases from ESPN's back, obviously going to put a lot of it on Disney Plus. Turner's back. Turner added back. I shouldn't say back. Turner's getting the first piece of NHL. I think they're going to be the first one to broadcast a league championship not on linear TV when the Stanley Cup Finals are going to be on. It's the first time ever, but it's inevitable. We've been talking about it for a while. You talk about it, Jim. The amount of money that flows between consumers and brands and leagues and media owners and players, it hasn't slowed down. And the more, it's not even just money that comes in from media or brands. You think about some of these new categories, like gambling was not a category, and gaming is to me a really stark example. 10 years ago, probably even 5 years ago, the thought of having a competitive, a major league franchise in Las Vegas was just like, there's no way that's ever going to happen. And, we used to, we joke about people who, make sort of casual inferences about like, that play was overwhelming when the people went, over the point spread. And now, ESPN's got a studio at Caesar's Palace. It's not a bad thing, but it's like, gaming is now legalized in, I think it's 19 states. That business is just completely blown up. And as media owners and looking for new revenue streams, the amount of money, and I don't know Dish's situation, who you've partnered up with, but like everybody and every media owner has found a way to build a really powerful partnership with DraftKings and FanDuel and BetMGM and all those guys. It's just like the money just seems to never stop flowing. One of the cool facts was Nevada, which is, people would think the only state where you can do gaming, isn't even in the top 5 in terms of the amount of gaming that happens, because it's just like New Jersey and Pennsylvania and all these big states with all the online gaming. It's just so much money. The money hasn't stopped flowing, and it's not going to stop. I don't think it's going to stop flowing. And whether it be gaming or, the NBA was talking about, expansion. Are they talking about expansion because they think there's a lot of good players who could stand to get some attention? Or are they doing it because, expansion right fees aren't part of the collective bargaining agreement? It's like all these things kind of like work into it, where it is super complex, it is super expensive, but it still flows. It's still, like you said at the very beginning, it's the only place to get a number. It's virtually the only place to get a rating and get impact.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to slow down. I'm it's like the little boy who cried wolf. For 15 years of me saying it's got to slow down at some point. I don't see any reason why. Again, we've just gone through another cycle. Maybe after we see the true potential of streaming and we see how many. I think I saw a fact the other day, a third of Disney Plus's subscribers, maybe it was ESPN Plus's, subscribers are from outside the United States, from one country outside the United States. They're from India, because they all want to watch, India Premier League cricket. It's like there's so much going on. I think it'll be really interesting to see 5 years, 7 years of the potential of how much are consumers really willing to pay for streaming and how it impacts. And then maybe things will slow down, but I don't see any reason why it's not going to keep growing for the next, immediate period of time. Sorry if that was a rambling answer.
No, please. No, it's absolutely true. And to answer your question, we are aligned with DraftKings.
Yeah.
And they're literally,
they're amazing.
They're integrated right into the Sling and Dish interface.
Yep.
And
that's probably turned into, Jim, and without putting you on the spot, that's probably turned into one of your largest advertising categories overnight, whereas 5 years ago it was nothing.
Yeah, it is in the process of doing so. It is still, it has been scaling and will continue to do so. Yes, no doubt. I don't know, is there anything else you want to touch on sports?
I mean, there's so many things going on. I mean, again, in sports, I think it's, I mean, there's so many things going on around, rights fees and opportunities. I think that, it'll be interesting to see how fast, stadiums ramp up. And, again, NFL drafts tonight, the schedule comes out in a couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see what happens if stadiums become full this fall. And I hope they do. It'll be interesting to see how fast things get back to, from a participation standpoint, back to normal. I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with, continued rights fees and the role of streaming in terms of driving audiences. It's just a fascinating time to be in our business, right?
Yeah, I was
never a dull moment.
Yeah, no doubt. I was in and around the Madison Square Garden Tuesday night, and it was, probably only 4,000 fans they let into the Ranger game, but you could see the Ranger fans kind of descending down, and it was kind of a nice, kind of shadow of things that once were, and hopefully we'll be back to that. And I don't know if there'll be full stadiums by the end of the year, but certainly closer to 50% or higher.
I'm from Philly. I'll resist temptation to take a shot at the Rangers.
We'll leave it at that. Me being a Giants season ticket holder as well. But
I have a virtual background of myself with the Super Bowl trophy. I decided not to, it was only a couple years ago.
So just to pivot up to I'd love to get your quick opinion on Addressable, where you see Addressable fitting within the video marketplace, just real quick, and then we can move on to another couple of subjects.
Sure. No, I think from a targeting standpoint, I think it's great. I think that, again, we have to sort through, the user experience part. I think the opportunity of how can we figure out the creative side? How can I figure out how to create enough good content for a premium video experience where I can, again, I'm keeping it, the simplest form is like, I can show a sports benefit to a sports guy, and a food, to you and I are sports guys, and a food benefit, and a travel benefit, and a shopping benefit. I mean, when we figure out how to deliver messages to create a better user experience, I think that's a huge opportunity where Addressable will kind of leapfrog some of the other things that have, some of the other elements that are out there. But I think, today, big opportunity from a targeting standpoint, bigger opportunity once we figure out how to deliver better content, contextually relevant content.
Great, appreciate that. All right, we're gonna take some questions from the audience. Here's one. How do you see media partnerships, especially in TV, evolving in as we get into the 2021, 2022 upfront?
I think the more it depends upon the marketers, right? There are some marketers who are more inclined to look for different types of relationships than others. Again, as I talked about before, there's no right or wrong. We spend a lot of energy trying to be contextually relevant, trying to build relevant experiences for customers and consumers. And in a lot of cases, we tap into media partners to do some really, really cool creative things. And I'll spare you the list. So I think for those clients, for those marketers who see the value in really building powerful relationships to kind of help drive experiences or drive cool content, integrations, things like that, I think it's going to be more and more the case. I think the market, the way we think about it, I think the market is going to turn into two pieces. It's going to be bifurcated into two areas. On one side of the coin, you're going to have a group who is only going to be pushing on those relationships, whether they be around content, whether they be around experiences, whether they be around other forms, and that's going to become more and more aggressive. On the other side, it's all going to be commodity. It's all going to be, and I suspect sorry for the media sellers in the crowd. It's all going to be programmatic soon. It's, and I'm not going to like give you a brash like claim it's going to be the next 5 years, as some people in the industry did 15 years ago. But I mean, it's going to happen. So the market's either going to be all about experiences or all about like commodities and programmatic. And I think that we're going to split in that place. And I think today the industry is kind of like stuck in the middle. We do a little bit of programmatic. We do a little bit of like experiences and things like that, but we need to, and again, that sell from a media owner standpoint, really understanding your marketer's business and creating programs and things like that. It's hard, man. It's heavy lifting for your average media seller to really kind of dig into what a client's trying to accomplish and how to create, cool programs. It's not plug and play. It's not cookie cutter. It's really hard, but I think that's where there's a huge opportunity.
Great insight there. There's a question here. Have you changed your data strategy over the last 6 to 8 months? And I read a little blurb the other day that I think Mastercard's the 11th or 12th most trusted company in the world, which is incredibly important when you're dealing with data privacy and all of that. But love to hear your insight in terms of your data strategy.
Yeah, so I mean, without getting into too many gory details, data, we have a huge opportunity, right? It's kind of like a lot of the things we talked about with some of the different media choices. We have a huge opportunity because we have a lot of information, right? There are 2 billion cardholders out there, and we have a lot of information about specific uses. Because of data privacy laws prohibit us from the ability to be able to to use that at a really direct, precise level. We're very sensitive about consumers and customers and their right to know how we're using data, when we're using data, and we're very, the safety and security of our consumers and customers is super important to us. Has our strategy changed over the last 6 to 8 months? I would say it subtly changes as laws change. Again, we would love the opportunity to do more. There are now, new privacy laws in Europe. Hopefully we won't have 50 different privacy laws in the United States. It's just, it would become onerous. Some different countries are coming up with new privacy laws. I mean, I think it's going to be continue to evolve. It hasn't radically changed in 6 to 8 months. And you could go on to, we've written a white paper about, our data, philosophy and how we, make sure that consumers are aware whenever we're using data. They have the opportunity to, opt out of us using data. They know when we're using it, why we're using it, who we're using it with. We're very protective about the consumer's right to their own information. And if you really wanted to, you could go and, get a white paper, on the Mastercard site. But so we're super protective. And it hasn't changed radically over 6 to 8 months. It changes subtly as laws change.
Sure. Here's another question. I asked you just to limit it to the United States. What behaviors, trends, any consumer expectations do you expect to stick as we emerge from this particular time? I mean, I personally believe there's this, this pent-up consumer demand that is just going to explode. Whether I want to go to this place or I want to buy that car or whatever that may be. But I'd love to hear what you think will stick and then ultimately, conversely, what might change and evolve for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what my favorite fact, and again, it's somewhat self-serving for Mastercard, was e-commerce, the growth of e-commerce. It took 10 years to move 10 percentage points in the amount of transactions in the United States that were done in e-commerce. It took 10 years to go from 5% to 15%. It took 8 weeks to move the next 10%. So the speed and the rapid escalation of e-commerce is something that's going to stay. Will it continue to be at 25% where it was at its peak? It'll probably go. It potentially is going to go down a little bit, but it's not going to materially change. People like the experience. People like the convenience of being able to shop at home and have things delivered to them and things like that. So I think that things like e-commerce are going to be here to stay. Maybe not at the same levels. It might retract a little bit. I think some of the other behaviors around passion, eventually, we're going to move around. We're going to be back to like the culinary business, which morphed from, a dine out experience to a, DoorDash experience. No knock on DoorDash. It's just a different experience. I think that'll come back, and people will eventually like go out and about and go out in restaurants and stadiums and airplanes and things like that again. So I think maybe not at the same level. I think that some of those things that really took a beating, and for us in our business, travel and culinary are probably the first two. They're eventually going to come back, and we just announced earnings today, and we didn't get into real gory detail by categories, but I mean we're seeing travel, especially in a lot of local travel. If you see advertisers now, you're seeing a lot of local travel now. You're seeing airlines. I see a lot of Southwest ads now. I see an occasional Delta. So people are starting to come back. I think they'll start to come back. Maybe not. It'll take a while to get back to the same levels. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does, and we see that for sure. Cruise lines, tourism boards, it's ramping up, and probably will only continue to do so. Another question here from the audience was: there's been a lot of marketers who have cut back on budgets this year, and without giving us anything proprietary, the question is just: have you changed? Have you pivoted beyond just the OTT? Or have you, have any of your strategies changed from a volume standpoint, or no? I'm just curious.
I mean, I think we're a public company, so we have numbers that we report to the financial community, and we're a publicly held company. And if we have a certain profit margin, our shareholders expect us to keep the same profit margin. If your business is down, and again, business was down between 2020 and 2019. Business was down. Our ad spend, if you look in, I'm not telling tales out of school. If you looked in the competitive tools in this country, it would look, our spend was down. So yeah, there's no masking the fact that for a lot of marketers, spend was down. And we think that it will recover when business recovers. So our spending was definitely down. It's not just a function of recalibrating how we're going to take the pie and slice it up. Yeah, the pie got smaller. There's just no way to mask that.
Sure. I appreciate that. All right, just on the leadership front, I'm sure you've been asked this question in the past, but I'd love to just get your take. What is the last year like? What has shocked you? Like, take us back to last April, May, and I don't know if the sky's falling, but clearly things are changing. And how did you kind of pivot to remote working? Were there any learnings? How did you?
I think it's twofold, right? One, the first one is a genuine surprise, because I haven't done a huge amount of remote learning. Occasionally I'll do it. For me, a big surprise in how much we can do remotely. We had to. We didn't have a choice, right? So, the amount of stuff that we can do, and the amount of tools that we have, and everybody's got their, not everybody, but most people have their home. If I were to turn my camera around, I have my big screen and a couple of my laptops, and all sitting in my basement, which we didn't have before, right? So the amount we can accomplish remotely is a surprise to me, and probably most people. It catches up on people. There's fatigue. There's a lot of things going around about, Zoom fatigue and people wanting to kind of recalibrate how often. I mean, I used to have somewhere between, depending upon where I was coming from, somewhere between a half an hour commute and an hour commute, just to kind of a way to decompress and wind down. Now I have a 2-story commute. I walk down 2 flights of stairs and I'm in the office. It's like the amount of time when you're on, I've had some really long days. So, so I think that I'm not alone. Everybody, we've all worked harder when we didn't think that I'm going to work from my basement. Of course, I'm not going to work as hard. I worked harder than I did this year than I have in years past. I think as we think about going back, it's not a long-term solution. I think that we need to be cognizant of, there are parts of this, as many Zoom calls as we can have, there's still parts of doing our job to its full potential that still requires being together, collaborating as, face to face, whether it be our teams or whether it be with customers and, partners. I think we have to get back to some kind of model where there's a little bit of interaction. I think that to say that we can completely replace the old way with work from home, I don't think that we're quite there. I think that figuring out that balance is important. So I think that it's important to learn, surprise how much we can do. And it's important to realize we got to get back so we can kind of, get back up to 100% capacity in whatever form that looks like.
Yeah. Certain companies just said you never have to come back. I personally, firmly believe that's not the answer.
I don't think it is.
You have to go back 5 days a week, but time will tell.
It depends on your job, right? So some people have, some people might have jobs where if you work in the call center, or you work in an environment where you truly are doing your own stuff and you're not dependent upon working with people, maybe you can do your job from home. But for a lot of us, in most of our jobs, we talk about, most of the people on this call, marketers, media, media owners, agencies, et cetera, we can't do all that from just sitting in my basement. And my basement's lovely and all, but I gotta move around and see some people.
Sure. Just here's another question that came in. Who are some of the marketers that you look up to, brands that you look up to who are doing it right?
I never have a good answer for this. Yeah, I think I never have a great answer for this. I really admire brands who can really kind of juggle the balance between brand and performance. I think some of the telco companies have an opportunity to do some really cool things because they have, they're cognizant of their brand, but they still have to, still have the ability to be able to drive performance. A lot of retailers in today's environment, I'm jealous of some people who can get more direct performance. Like a lot of retailers who I can find out next day sales. Like when I was an agency guy, I used to have work on a retail client, and 10 o'clock the following morning, we got a dump of like sales in every single store. And, so I'm sort of jealous sometimes of people who have that much immediate, research, because in today's day and age of being more data-driven, things like that. So I'm more, envious, because our model it's a very different model, right? Because we're dependent upon, we're basically a network, right? So while there are 2 billion cardholders out there, we don't have direct relationship with a lot of them, right? That comes from every Mastercard you have in your wallet doesn't come from us, comes from Citi or Bank of America or Capital One or whatever in this country. So we're not as strong in the B2C space, so we don't have as many consumer interactions. So I'm kind of jealous of that sometimes because I can get more data and information.
Okay, here's another question that keep coming in.
I think it's a good thing, or we're either not answering questions straight or we're being interesting. I don't know which.
So once we get through this, how will your company, or maybe more your vertical, change? What will change permanently? Like, what do you think you've shedded, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I think the parts around e-commerce is going to, the way we think about some of the products and things like that. Because I mean, people used to think like our company people used to think of like legacy of, it's a piece of plastic you used to buy stuff. And not that long ago, I had somebody who wasn't terribly informed come to me and be like, gosh, you guys must be threatened because people aren't using plastic credit cards anymore. And it's like, if you think that's the only part of the business that we're in, I mean, we consider our Mastercard is a technology company in the payments industry. So I think that for us, it's like the more we can branch out into all those technological places to, help consumers transact smoother and easier. We still have an environment before COVID, and I haven't seen a number since, probably around the world, about 70% of all transactions were still done in cash. And you may be like, there's no way that was done. But if you really think about it, and we started to have a deeper conversation, you'll be like, holy cow, there's still a lot of, so a lot of cash displacement. We'll continue to grow. We'll continue to be there in whatever payment platform in whatever shape and payment platform that people need to be in. So, I mean, that evolution from like, a credit card to a technology company to help people, in the payments industry, that's kind of where we're going.
Okay. I'm the sort of the hook there. Yes.
Well, go on,
you
please.
wrap up. No, wrap up, please.
No, I was just gonna say, no, appreciate, Ben, great insights. Really appreciate your time and the prep work. And want to wish you the best luck for the rest of the year.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you. That was a great conversation. It's really interesting to hear from big brands like Mastercard. Did want to point out one thing though. While sports the interest in sports is not dying, there's a lot of research out recently about how younger fans in particular, aren't watching full games. Not so much the NFL, but NBA, MLB.
That's right.
They'll monitor it on Twitter or some other, so ESPN.com. And then if it looks close in the fourth quarter, they'll tune in.
No, Alan, I think that's right. And I think as a marketer, you have to figure out a couple things. One, you have to figure out different platforms. Your sports investment today doesn't just consist of putting your ads onto that big, monitor that's sitting behind my back. It's like, how do you stretch out over all those things? I mean, we've made a small but important investment in gaming, which is a hugely underutilized, undermarketed, unless you're endemics. There's a lot of endemic brands in there. And there's some brands like Wendy's comes to mind who's doing some really, really cool things in that space. I mean, gaming is just taken off. And, and we've done a small investment. I mean, so Alan, I think your point is right. Yeah. But we got to be there in all those different platforms. And the platform mix is way different than it was 10 years ago. But you're right.
Oh, 100%.